So, I'm joined today by the lovely Celia Heritage, who is a professional genealogist and also a qualified therapist, and she runs Mind Pebble down on Romney Marsh. So, hello, Celia. It's lovely to see you today.
Hello, Deborah. Lovely to be here.
So, we're going to be talking today a little bit about the work that you do and the exciting new project that you've got going on. To begin with, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Wow. So I, for many years, was a professional genealogist, and that was my main business. And then very suddenly and quite unexpectedly, in my early 50s, I experienced a series of major life-changing events, which basically, within the space of 6 or 7 months, turned my life upside down, inside out. I lost my marriage, I had to close my business, and I also almost lost my home. And because of the things that happened to me in that period, which I now refer to as my trauma years, my life really changed beyond all recognition and took me off down a different path, at least temporarily. And from the experiences that I encountered during that period, I actually decided to retrain as a therapist. During that time, when I was going through all these traumatic events, I was very lucky to meet some therapists quite by chance, quite serendipitous, that helped me. And working with one in particular, a lady called Sharon Hall, who was a trauma hypnotherapist, really stimulated or awakened an interest for me in the mind and how it works. Because if you understand how your mind works, it's such a powerful tool to help you with whatever you're going through. And Sharon really came in at a serendipitous time, quite by chance, and helped me. And I wanted to be able to help other people as I've been helped. And I didn't want anyone to have to go through what I went through without being prepared for it. Because if I'd had the tools and if I'd had the understanding, I could have got through that time a lot better, and the outcome might have been more fortuitous as well. And at a very difficult moment in my life, I was lucky enough to be able to find a job in the corporate world. I worked for ancestry.com, and I worked for them for 5 years, which again gave me a broad experience with working with a different range of people. And 2 years ago, I left Ancestry and I started working full time as a therapist. And that's when I founded Mind Pebble. And I thought, to be honest, that I'd moved away from family history, doing people's research and showing them how to research and teaching them. And I thought, this is a new chapter in my life, and I'm now working as a therapist, and I'm having an amazing effect. And it's wonderful to see these people coming in distressed but going out in a much better place. And then gradually over the course of the months, I realised that every time I was working with a therapy client, we ended up talking about their family history. And we'd be looking at their parents and then their grandparents and the upbringing of each generation, because inevitably that has an effect on who you are today and how you've ended up emotionally, and also, of course, through your DNA and how you're wired. And it soon became clear, this is how it feels to me anyway, all the events that had happened to me over that period of 6 or 7 years had actually brought me back in a big circle. And it was almost as if I'd sort of gone through these traumatic events to show me various things, to go and get trained as a therapist, but all for one purpose. And out of this sprang my new project, Reframing Roots. And this is where I use family history research, actual documentary research, working with my clients or my students to shed light on their family over several generations, not just parents and grandparents, and setting it against a background of psychological insights to help each person understand themselves better and why they are the way they are. And so people, they could just be mentally curious about, oh, I wonder why I react like this, or I wonder why I'm good at this. Where does that come from? But in some cases, people are struggling with things, perhaps relationships within the family, or perhaps they're struggling with certain aspects of their own mental health. And it is almost, you know, in a nutshell, this is who I am. It's the genealogist and the therapist in one.
Yeah, that is just so fascinating. It seems like you've been, like you say, on the perfect journey, and nothing has been wasted there, because everything that you've learned and everything that you've done has come together now and brought you to this point, really, hasn't it? It's
Yes, I must admit,
fascinating.
if you told me this was going to happen, yeah, 7 years ago, I would have been absolutely gobsmacked. I had no idea that my life would take this turn in my 50s. But though, I mean, a lot of things that happened to me were very traumatic, and I would never want to go through them again. I would never wish them on anyone. They certainly were an experience, and they grew me in many, many ways and opened my eyes to the way I'm wired and the way I react, and then how I can help other people achieve, I say, peace and harmony in their lives, which sounds a bit corny, doesn't it? But it is true.
And it's so often the way, isn't it, that we can't help other people until we've lived something of that ourselves. And through living that, it then enables, that is what enables you to be able to understand other people enough to be able to help them. So there's value in that suffering, if you like, isn't it? And you can turn that around. It's fascinating because on the surface, you wouldn't think that family history, genealogy, and therapy could to intersect in that way, would you? They don't normally, seem to sit together, but you've brought them together. You've seen that connection, and you've been able to, through your combination of unique skills, you've created this almost new therapy model.
Yes, I mean, there are plenty of people out there who have thought about something similar, or but along different lines. So you get ancestral healing and meditation and doing your family tree, and then, seeing what your ancestors were like, and then trying to heal the trauma of your ancestors themselves. But I've turned it round slightly, turned it round in its head. So you're actually starting with yourself and what you want to find out, what you feel you need explaining to you. For example, somebody off the first course of Reframing Roots, he said, I just had to find out why I was the way I was made before I die. He said, I just wanted to understand myself and for it to all be clear. And because I've got the dual hats of professional qualified genealogist and also qualified therapist, I can teach documentary research as well as provide the psychological background and explaining to people why they're feeling the way they are and why they may be reacting as they are on an individual level.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? And what a gift to be able to help people to truly understand themselves, where they've come from and how they are the way they are. That's amazing. So, is it just trauma that we're talking about here in terms of what people are exploring, or is it something much wider than trauma?
I think we need to be careful using the word trauma, because certainly if you're going to use it, it's trauma with a small t in many cases, not for everyone. Obviously, some people could have had terrible events happen to them. But even, trauma with a small t is important. So things that are said to us by our caregivers in those early formative years can knock our confidence or put our self-esteem right down, even if they were just said flippantly. But also it's looking at not just the negatives, but the positives. It's embracing us for the person we are and recognize that we've all got amazing talents and gifts, though we don't always recognize them. And for a lot of people I work with are neurodiverse and have come to me with this sort of inherent feeling they don't fit in, and they never have, but many of them have got fantastic gifts and talents, but because they've always been slightly wacky or eccentric, and I include myself here because I'm neurodiverse, they've never really fitted in at school or at college. They've been a bit on the outside, and it's looking at them and looking at other members of the family and wiring and upbringing, and giving them the confidence to accept themselves and love themselves and be content with themselves as they are. So that is it's really a positive thing. And I'm always saying to people, don't just think this is looking for the things that are wrong with you. We're looking at the whole picture. And overall, the program I run, which is a mixture of group sessions and private one-to-ones, it's a jolly lot of fun, and it's wonderful to see the group interacting with each other. And even for people who've done a lot of their own family history research already, they often revisit it, look at it in a totally new light and get so much more from it, and also often manage to knock down roadblocks in the documentary research they may have had just by re-looking at it with me. Whereas we've also got people who are totally new to documentary family history research, and for them, they've just got this amazing world opening up of all these things they can find out about their family and how to do it. Because with the best will in the world, if you start your family history today, one of the main problems people have is that there's so much out there online, they don't know where to start or the best place to start. And a lot of people just pull information down from the internet and sadly get it wrong.
Yes, it's a minefield, isn't it, really? There's so much information. It's so overwhelming and confusing, isn't it, without your professional guidance to show them and help them to understand. So what sort of, when you uncover sort of family problems and issues, what sort of issues do you come across and in that kind of inherited problems or ancestral problems that you work with on your course? What sort of things come up?
Very often we find that you might have somebody who they may well come from a loving family, but there'll be internal resentments there towards another family member. Could be a sibling or parent. Very typically, I had one person who recently who'd, he loved his dad, but felt, he said as a teenager or young boy, oh, I frequently felt unloved, almost as if I were a nuisance. And his dad used to regularly criticize him, but gave very little encouragement with the things that he was good at. And he was possibly in some ways discouraged. And even though as he got older, he said, the relationship improved, he still carried this resentment with him until he came on the Reframing Roots course. And he realised that although he'd done a very detailed family tree, he'd never taken time out to go and ask his dad about his childhood years and what his upbringing was like. And he sort of said, well, I'm finding it very difficult to start this conversation. And I said to him, well, if you don't do it, you're going to be too late, because his dad was fairly elderly. And he found an opportune moment and they got to talking about it. And it turned out that his dad had had a fairly rough time as a child, and his own mama had been fairly dissuasive and threatened to send him away if he wasn't good enough, and he got the impression that he wasn't wanted. So his own father was actually fairly insecure. And this was really a light bulb moment and made everything clear as to why he'd held him back, and he was quite critical because he wanted to keep him with him and make sure he was safe and okay. And then very, very poignantly, his dad died just about 10 days after they'd had that conversation. And he just said to me, thank goodness I had that conversation when I did, because otherwise he would have gone to his grave and I wouldn't really have been able to let go of that resentment.
Isn't that just amazing? This is just an example, isn't it, of how important it is to do this work and to have those conversations. And the fact that he had that opportunity through you, through your encouragement, through doing your course, his mind was kind of opened to that. And he was, triggered almost to do that, to have that conversation, prompted to do it, and just in the nick of time. And now he's got so much from that. That is true healing, really, isn't it?
It is. And what came out of me of Group One, which launched back last autumn, and it very much was a trial. Let's get this out there, see how it happens, what evolve. And when I got the feedback from the first course, it's hard to describe, but I had this warm, glowing feeling, because the things they were coming back and telling with me showed how healed they had been. And that was just the short 2-month course version. And one lady said, it's given me the strength to live again and find fresh. She didn't actually use the word vitality, but she said she was in a really low place, and it's actually giving her that new aspect, the strength to go forwards with the rest of her life. And yeah, somebody said he'd now find clarity, and he could go quietly to, it sounds a bit morbid, but go quietly to his deathbed. Not that he was planning to die, but he'd struggled with his own thought patterns and the way he was since he was a child, and it now made more sense. And then someone else, I mean, we've talked about, the effect of parents and grandparents, and someone else was able to trace a couple of mindsets back to the 18th century and could see how certain patterns had been brought down to do with money. And then another student picked up on the fact that in her family, an illegitimacy had caused tensions, and that had affected the behaviour of the family line for the next couple of generations, including her own. And some of the other things we picked up on was the effect historically that early bereavement of mother, father, but also siblings, especially a sibling close to you in age, had on a child. And obviously this could still happen today, but specifically in Victorian times and earlier, this was a very common phenomenon. And this is very often where mindsets arise because there's been, and in this case, yes, there has been a trauma. So dad's died when the child is 7 and mum has 5 kids to bring up and things like this. And it's amazing how these set a pattern as to mindsets, which are then passed down right down to the present day.
Yeah, absolutely. Those shadows, they're cast long, aren't they, over
They
people's
are, yes.
That's really, it's incredibly powerful, isn't it? And also you alluded there, it kind of brings that inner peace once you come to terms with that, once you uncover that and you get the chance to resolve that almost for yourself and recognize it. And the first step is kind of becoming aware of it, isn't it? If you don't know it's there and you don't know about it, you can't see or change it, can you?
Absolutely. I think it's becoming aware of it and understanding how and why it's happened. And that is 3/4 of the way to healing.
Mm.
For some people, it's 100% of the way to healing.
Yes, it's hugely powerful, isn't it, to do
It
that
is.
work.
Yeah.
So, my interest is particularly around chronic illness, and I know there may be probably people listening who have chronic illness. How do you feel that this work interfaces with chronic illness? I know you've had your own health journey as well, and do you feel that there is a connection here between our physical health and this kind of ancestral traumas that we might be holding on to, or, things that might have happened that shaped us in the past?
Yes, absolutely. Because let's face it, our mind and our body, our physical health and our mental health are so irrevocably intertwined. You can't have one without the other. And, for me, physical and mental health, it's the same thing. Your mind comes from your brain's part of your body, and your mind's just trying to protect you. And all these potential emotional upheavals that have happened in the past are passed down through the generations. And this is particularly important for people with chronic illnesses in 2 ways. Firstly, any trauma that's passed down, although your DNA can't be changed, the way traumas that have happened to people can affect the way the DNA is read in later generations. And so, for example, studies have shown that Holocaust survivors, their children and grandchildren, there have been changes in the way the DNA has been read and the way they react to danger and stress and things like this. It's a survival technique. It's very, very clever. And that inevitably is going to work on the same principle. Obviously, that is an extreme example, but at a low level. And the other important thing is our DNA obviously forms the way that when we are born, we are wired a certain way. And for example, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And for many years, they didn't really understand much about it. And there's still an awful lot they don't know. But they now believe it's potentially, almost certainly in some ways, linked to autism. And also a lot of people with it are what we call highly sensitive people. So it's partly due to your inherited wiring. If I look down my family history, I can see that potentially my father was neurodiverse like me, and potentially my grandfather. So I was born a certain way, and that wiring potentially makes me more susceptible to things. I'm more likely to be overwhelmed by noise, by light. My mind, therefore, will be looking out, a bit like a meerkat, looking out, but be over vigilant for anything that it needs to alert me to keep me safe. And it gets very, very good at doing it. And so then I can become oversensitive in a much bigger way. And people who are like this, highly sensitive, or to do with the way they are wired, are more likely to be vulnerable to autoimmune conditions. And then on the back of that, especially for women, because we have so much on our plates these days, we're still supposed to be the caregivers, the people who have the children, and we have to hold down a job. And we're emotionally wired to be very loving, giving, and nurturing. It's in our female DNA. And we are giving so much of ourselves that because of that, we are also more susceptible to autoimmune and other conditions like EDS and MCAS. And it's very, very complex. And there's a lot we don't know. And I don't pretend to be an expert on that part of this, but understanding yourself, your family history, what's gone on each generation is going to give you that knowledge, that understanding. And I think once your mind can understand it, where it's come from, you gain that sort of a big sigh. Oh, now it makes sense. I know this happened with my family. I know my dad was wired like this. This is why I'm the way I am. And once we have that acceptance and understanding again, we can relax more. We're not sort of constantly, our mind's not constantly throwing up questions. Why me? Why has this happened? Which, as I'm sure you've been through, is to yourself, is like so many things seem to go wrong, don't they? And it starts to fall into place.
Yes, so fascinating, isn't it? And the way that stress interacts with our physical health, anything that promotes stress and any stress that we're holding subconsciously through things that we've inherited, through the way we've been brought up, through any traumas or any difficult experiences, that all changes our physical chemistry, doesn't it? And our biology and our bodies, which then impacts our physical health and vice versa. The physical health then impacts our emotional state, and they're so interconnected, aren't they? And
Yeah,
it's fascinating that it can be further back than just you. It can be, past generations of what you've inherited that are
absolutely.
affecting.
And if we look back with my historian's hat on again, if you look at the very word disease, it comes from dis-ease.
Yeah.
People knew a lot more in the past than a lot of people do today, because we get so hooked up on specialists and medicine. But sometimes we go back, people were in some ways a lot wiser, and we can simplify things. If we're stressed, we're probably going to get ill. If we're happy,
Yes.
we're less susceptible to illnesses, or if we get them, we're more easily able to fight them off or to manage them in the case of a physiological chronic illness.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we've got, if we are happier and less, holding less stress in our bodies, it affects, you were talking about gene expression and how, certain genetic conditions they may not express if you're not under stress and you're not holding that stress. It changes, it's not sealed in stone, is it? It's not a fate that you're destined to not be able to escape from. You can do a lot to change how your body is working through your mental and emotional well-being. So you feel then that this aspect of investigating your past and understanding yourself could be a kind of piece of the jigsaw for people with chronic illness.
Yes, and it's not, it's not a magic wand, but I find that certainly now I mean, I've done a lot of self-development work with myself, and obviously I've done my family history in detail. And when I was writing Reframing Roots, I I used myself as a case study, and that was actually really therapeutic for me, even though I knew my family background very, very closely. But to revisit it in the light of how were these people feeling? And, you can read a lot from the records. We can't actually go back and chat to all of them. We can use oral history and then look at information in documents that gives us clues. And although you have to be careful not to read too much into it, they can be very important clues. And I found that my work on my own family history I did in preparation for Reframing Roots allowed me to let go of residual anger I had towards my father and the way he had treated me emotionally, because I can now see that he was doing it for my own good. I didn't agree with what he was doing, and I still don't, but from his point of view, he was doing what would keep me safe in the future. And now I can see that though he couldn't express it, because he just couldn't get it out there with words or anything like that, he did really love me. And for many years, I would say until, fairly recently, I had strong feelings that I was unloved and, hadn't done it quite right. But since that has all fallen into place, I can tell you my health, my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome symptoms, they're never going to go, but they are a lot better. And my pain levels have gone right down.
Gosh, that is fascinating, isn't it? Thank you
Mm.
so much for sharing that because I think that is such a powerful example of that the pain of feeling unloved is something that I think a lot of people carry, isn't it? And it's a huge kind of ancestral trauma that gets passed on. And once you can understand where that comes from, it's hugely, hugely liberating, isn't it? And that effect on your nervous system, the pain, is all connected, isn't it? If we're holding a lot of distress emotionally, our pain levels are going to be worse. And that's just so powerful as an example of the effect that this work can have on our physical health. So if there are people listening who are maybe a bit skeptical and who maybe don't feel comfortable with this idea of a connection between our mental and emotional state and our physical health, and maybe don't feel that their emotional state is affecting their physical health, what would you say to them?
I'd say step back and reflect when you have your pain flare-ups or things get worse, whether it's pain or something else. Notice what's triggered them. Are there common things there that happen just before? And it could be a couple of days before. It may not be immediately before the pain kicks in. Are there patterns? What are you doing? How are you feeling? And keeping a diary of how you're feeling each day really does make you think about what was going on. And on the days that you felt good, what happened? Very often we forget about the good days and what had happened when we had our good days and what happened before, what we were doing, how we were feeling, what somebody had said to us. The mind naturally gravitates towards negativity to keep us safe. And so we will normally only remember the bad things. So yeah, step back and look at yourself, reflect, spend some time, 10 minutes a day, just reflecting on how you've been feeling, how physically and mentally. And then I'd be surprised if you don't see some connections.
It's really good advice.
And it
Yes.
could just be, something somebody said to you that was nice, or somebody might have said something that was not so nice, and that can send you down. It can cause a flare up. If somebody treats you badly, I remember not so long ago, I received an email from somebody, and my health had been great. I was in a good place, no pain, and this email really upset me, and I went into a flare-up. It was as simple as that because I was so upset.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say here that we're not saying that the condition is imaginary and that it's somehow a psychological thing, but it's the real physical interconnection between our mental and emotional state and how that changes us and how it can impact our health. And it's not like you said at the beginning, it's not that this is a magic wand and that if you're always happy and you can somehow magically make everything in life wonderful, you'll be cured of your Ehlers-Danlos or whatever you're living with. It's that you begin to understand those connections and then you can take action, can't you? You can protect yourself if you understand that stress or emotional upheaval triggers your physical health. You can see that pattern and you can start to change things. Maybe it's your job that's making you ill and, makes you worse. So maybe you think about changing your job, or somebody in your life that, you notice a pattern that they trigger you, and you can maybe make some changes. It gives you that sense of control a little bit, doesn't it?
Well, it can do, but I mean, the two potential changes there you just mentioned are particularly challenging ones to make and can, of course, bring with them even more stress.
Yes.
So it's not easy in that respect. But at least then, if you have the awareness of where it's coming from, it's going to help you because it's not just you, it's playing off someone else. And when you say, we're not saying it's not all in your head, but even psychological pain, it might all be in your head, but it's still very real. It's not that you're making it up, because the mind's very clever, so it's going to throw up pain if it thinks it should, to stop you doing something so that it can protect you, because all your subconscious mind wants to do is to keep you safe and alive. And unfortunately, it can use old patterns, old habits, including throwing up chronic pain, to do that. And again, once you've realized this, and one thing on my work individually with my therapy clients, we go into subconscious mind and ask the mind, say, just turn the pain levels down, give her a break, please. And you can actually get them to imagine a dial in their head, a dial with the pain score on, and imagine it coming down, bringing that pain down. And you can actually try that yourselves. If you're in pain, you can get back control and actually bring some of those pain levels down to an acceptable level.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it? It's extraordinary how the brain works like that. And it's a really good point that you make there, that all pain is generated in the brain. So if you were to break your leg, it would be the same pain as if you were to have a mentally generated pain. It's the same pain. It feels the same. There's no way to tell the difference. So it's not that some pain is real and other pain isn't real. All pain is just as painful
Yeah,
and
and
equally valid.
all pain is created by the mind, but it is real.
Yes, exactly. Of course. Yeah. So you've mentioned your Reframing Roots program. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that and maybe a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and when the next one is running if they're interested in doing that with you?
Yes, of course. So the group 2 begins on Tuesday, the 26th of March, 6 p.m. They're all online via Zoom. The group sessions are an hour and a half, and it runs over a course of several months. So you've got 9 group sessions and 6 private one-to-one sessions, which I'll work with you on a one-to-one basis to work out what you need, whether it's sort of therapy connected one-to-one sessions or family history tuition or a mixture of both. And we devise your roadmap, what you want to get from this, where you want to go, what you want to achieve. And this, of course, can evolve as you go along. Then you've got your wonderful group sessions, and the group works great because it's a safe space and working in a group is really supportive, and you get a lot from listening to other people, what they're going through as well. So if you'd like to find out more about that, you can go to my website at mindpebble.co.uk, or you can just Google me, Celia Heritage, and my family history website will come up probably first in the search results. And if you go to my courses and talks section, Reframing Roots is there. Same information, slightly different presentation on the two different websites. And I do also have a couple of taster sessions coming up, one on the 13th of March and one on the 18th of March. So you can find details there on LinkedIn under Celia Heritage, and they will be going up on my website as well. And if you've got any questions, you just want to, find out a bit more and you'd rather chat, just drop me a line by email from one of my websites. I'll be happy to talk to you.
Oh, that's super. It sounds really exciting. I'm hoping that you'll get some really good, engaged people coming to your sessions because it sounds as though it could be really beneficial for people. So
I'm really
yeah.
looking forward to this group because I'm introducing the workbook, which is a very sort of fun play workbook, which we're going to work through together. And this is a new thing for this coming group. And I've also extended it. So we're starting 26th of March, and we've got fortnightly group meetings until the middle of June. And then we've got a break for the summer, so you can go off, do your research or reflect. And then we come back for the autumn for a few more sessions then. So we're going to see how this is going. And it's exciting because it's evolving, and each group are giving me back a lot of information as to what's working well and where we can go next. So it's really a unique opportunity to be part of something new.
Absolutely. I think it's really exciting. Like you say, as it's evolving, each group is bringing something new and it's evolving as you're creating it. And that's just amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Celia, today. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. I think that it's been such a fascinating topic to explore, and I hope that people listening have got something of interest and value from it. And I will put Celia's contact details underneath this video, so look up her contact details and get in touch with her. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.